everyone. My name is DM Rawlings, the 10-Minute DM. I'm an experienced Forge in the Dark GM, and I'm here to offer my advice 10 minutes at a time. So you may notice a different configuration of the video today, and that is because I am now the proud owner of a new Candela Obscura core rulebook. This is the original core rulebook, and I figured what I would do here today is just go over it a little bit and kind of give my rambling review of it. This is way less scripted than most of my videos have been in the past, but I thought that this would be a good opportunity for people to see what the book is all about and then make their own decision as to whether or not they wanted to pick it up themselves. So first thing to notice, this is a reasonably thick book. It is hardcover. It has this beautiful kind of glossy little background with the some of the alchemical markings of some of the lighthouses that are a major reoccurring theme of Candela Obscura. Of course, on the back, we have the little pitch here that you can do, and it also has one of these absolutely delightful page markers that you can use to mark your favorite page and maybe scare your players with when you open it up to the section with the weird runes on it. But anyways, let's bust into this. So we can see that the book is stitched in here very, very well. It's a high quality paper that's being used. It contains such amazing things as a table of contents. What is a role-playing game section, an introduction, things that you would expect in a book. But where I think this book really, really excels is with some of the full-page artwork that sells you on the dream of what you're going to be playing. So while nothing is outright horrific, I think that they've done a very good job of bringing in things to scare you, things to make you question, what is that? You can see as this thing is wrapping its claws around the second story of a building and terrorizing these citizens. Very first section goes over what gameplay is going to be like, and what I really like about this section is that it says there's very few core rules within this world that should not change, and then it lists the things that it believes are sacrosanct, and then encourages you to do whatever you want. So if you wanted to take Candela Obscura and shift it through time to a different era, or you wanted to move the home city, or you wanted to do any number of other changes to it, the book encourages you to make the game your own and make it part of the conversation at the table with all of your players. All right, core system. This is the first major section, I would say, and this walks through a lot of the things that were in the quick start guide, things like stakes, but it also talks about the conversation, expectations, and how the role process is going to work as a collaboration between the players and yourself, how to make an action roll, ratings of 0, getting help, making group roles, that kind of thing. And then a page and a half on consequences, walking through a number of the consequences that I've talked about in some of my other videos. I feel like this section is a little bit light, because as a Forge in the Dark GM, managing these complications is one of the more important things that you're going to do. And there is a little bit later in the GM section that talks about GM moves that you can use whenever there's a mixed success or a failure. But ultimately, I'm going to be continuing to put out videos to help explain what these are. And I do think that many of the videos that I already have talking about the different kinds of complications map very well to the ones that they presented in this book as well. Oh, then we have gear. I love this gear section. The Blades in the Dark gear section is kind of all over the map, written in a few different places. It uses words like potency that aren't really well defined. This really, really sums it up well. What it's doing is saying, gear isn't giving you bonus dice. Instead, what it's doing is it's changing the conversation. It's making your stakes better if you have the right gear for the right job. It's making it so you can be more successful, setting higher expectations, or it's making it less risky for you to do things. And those are the knobs that you can tune when someone says, oh, well, what if I use this anti-bleed file that I happen to have. And then marks and scars, very identical to what was in the quick start guide. Some nice examples of how you might be able to make changes and why you would make those changes. And then a good little section here talking about some of the tropes and poor things that have happened in the past when it relates to harm. I'm very glad that this section exists. From there, we get into making a character, and I'll point out here, there's a lot of diegetic, like, in-world documents that you're able to read. So this one is welcoming you to a particular circle of Candela Obscura, and I think that this does a really good job of putting you in the moment and helping you understand what it's like to be a part of this society. These gorgeous specialty cards kind of look like tarot cards for all of the different roles and specialties. 5 whole pages of these, all of them absolutely beautiful. How you derive your action ratings, how you get bonus actions or bonus action dots, your starting drives and how to get extra of those, what your starting resistance is, and then what your gilded actions are, and then your abilities. And these are broken up by role and by specialty. Every single role has 3 different abilities of the 5, and then every single specialty has 6. We can see the journalist there. So when you create your character, you're going to grab 1 of each of those, so you start with 2 out of a possible 9. And these really run the gamut, helping you realize the fiction for the different kind of things. So criminal abilities that make you better at doing criminal stuff, or detective abilities that boost that. And then we get into the end section, which is adding character details, like what is the catalyst event that brought you into Candela Obscura, and then relationships. And there are 72 different prompts that you can ask another player in order to help link your backgrounds together, which I think is a really good touch. Whether or not you want to just randomly roll that, or you just want to go through them and then pick one that you think is going to be cool. Then we get into circle creation, defining what your circle is going to be about, answering some questions about that, as well as your starting name for your circle, what your chapter house is going to look like, what your starting special ability is going to be, and the resource points that are going to help you recover between sessions. A little bit about assignments in the how to play section. Then we get some player advice. I'll definitely be covering all of this in a future video. A little bit about PvP. A little bit more information about some of the drives and resistances, and then the actions themselves. More on some of the Candela specific gear that you might want to use throughout the course of the game. How circle advancement works. And then a lovely 8 or so pages example of play to walk you through what it's going to feel like being at a table. And then lastly, we finish this section off with a little bit about what happens between assignments. And I do think this is undercooked a little as well. I really would have liked to have seen more prompts, I suppose, to encourage people to have their character exist between the assignments. And I do think that the Critical Role actual play didn't quite play this area of the game up as much as maybe it could. I suppose it was rushed for production time, so no slight intended there. Then we start talking about the world, starting with the supernatural world. Some of the terms that we use to define it, like phenomena, and talking about thinnings and setting more of kind of the tone of the game. Things like artifacts that are infested with bleed, and then a section on alchemy, which really is important for Old Fair. Then we talk about the history of Candela Obscura and its structure and what it's kind of about. I like this quite a bit. It's very light in its touch, so it doesn't really try to prescribe what Candela Obscura is supposed to be, so that in your individual games you have a lot of latitude for what they're like, minus a few different factors if you want to follow this canon. Then we get into some of the organizations, less than I expected, but still more than we got in the Quick Start Guide. Some of them are pretty cool. I just don't think that there's really enough to create an interesting game between the games. Then we get into the Fairlands. There are 12 different districts. There's a little bit on the time period, this lovely little calendar here, flag, history, talking about the war, and then some of the culture and the government and things like that all gets covered here. Then we move on to life and times, what people do for fun, different holidays, death and mourning. So really some things that create a unique culture for this world, which is similar to Earth, but not exactly. And then from there we get into New Fair itself. 12 different districts, all of which get a one-page treatment where there's a description, there's a few points of interest. Then we have kind of a snippet of a starting possible assignment. I love this. This is great. The ability to prompt people as to what kind of stories might be told in each of these districts really goes a long way towards helping people, GMs specifically, build out the game so that they can tell the kinds of stories that they want, but they're also informed by some of the things that are here. Once you get through that, then you start getting into Old Fair. A couple more pages here. Yeah, past the varnish. We get into Old Fair. And Old Fair doesn't have a map, and I'm very glad they made this conscious decision not to provide a map. They just gave areas and then features and example phenomenon that might occur there so that you as a GM can just kind of move it around and place things where you want and create that air of mystery that you really, really want for this kind of thing. And quite a bit too. There's a big, solid number of interesting places to go in Old Fair that really breathes life into it. I love the Unscathed Alley. I think this is my favorite of them because it's such a fun little mystery that's presented. Then we get into the Fairlands, so the neighboring area from New Fair and some of the areas that are there with the same kind of treatment that we had before. Things like the Tottergrass and the Verge and the West Wreck. Now we get to the running the game section. And to start with, we have our GM principles, which I'm definitely going to cover in another video. I think they're very well written and capture what we need to for Candela Obscura. Then we get into making moves, which I mentioned earlier. So these are example consequences that you can introduce into the game, and it spends a fair amount of time laying out the different kinds of things that you can do when you need to pull upon them. Running a session 0, preparing for the game. My favorite bit of art, I think, in the entire book, just because it's so evocative. I love this eye above a door that's got an array of eyes around it. That's beautiful. Then we get creating a Lightkeeper, how to deal with combat, and what marks are going to look like, and some guidance there. We talk about countdown dice and the different kinds, like a phase countdown, completion, and consequence countdowns. Very similar to the clocks video that I made previously, and it's good to see that this did make the cut so that you can introduce challenges that require more than a single roll to overcome. Talking about how to set stakes and then what the assignment structure is going to look like. We get 4 sample assignments here that I'm not going to dwell on too much because possible future spoilers. Then we start getting into some of the GM resources. So additional chapter houses, extra locations in New Fair that you can just move around and drop wherever you want, as well as some NPCs that you can do the same on. Some very special gear, some artifacts that you might want to hand out through play. Descriptions of different creatures and how they're used and how they're weird in the world. And then finally we get a few tables where we can pull additional information as needed. Full page on organizations, just like 2 sentences each, which is a good primer, but again, I do wish that they spent more time here. Ultimately, I really love this book. I think that it's well positioned for someone to pick up and have a pretty good idea, especially if they've backed it up by watching Spencer's second chapter of Candela Obscura. So, really, at the end of the day, I'm just excited for this to get into more people's hands and to see more actual plays make it onto YouTube and on Twitch and whatnot. And more so to see people take these rules and make their own new fairs and their own chapters and tell their own stories in this world, because it's really well done. And if you manage to make it this far, you probably want to hit that subscribe button, because if you do, you're going to get notified the next time that I create a new video covering more topics. Most of what I talk about is GMing, Forge in the Dark games like Candela Obscura, and the kind of tools that you need to be successful at that, but I also am dabbling in some player stuff as well. Anyways, I've been DM Rawlings, your 10-minute DM. Please enjoy your Candela Obscura rulebook responsibly.